Right, so stop the transcription. Evening, everyone. Yeah, I hope that the assignment submission has gone well. For those of you that still have to submit, good luck for later. I think everything's fine. Just remember to keep glancing at the assessment recording that we've had. Play a little bit, do that question, play the next bit, do that question. Other than that, you should be absolutely fine. In terms of AI, please be careful that we use AI ethically. I'm not going to discuss that now. Right, I'm going to let my face go and rest, and then we'll start with the rest of this managerial ethics unit. Right, guys, now that I'm gone, I can behave naturally. So when we look at the difference between individual ethics and managerial ethics, I think the first thing to remember is that you can almost argue that you would have two different sets of ethics, that individual ethics would guide you through life. But when you're in a context of an organization, the definition of ethics may change because organizations have specific ethical codes, and those ethical codes have to be adhered to. So you cannot use the same ethics that you use in daily life to actually guide your behavior always in organizations. Is that a fair comment? Is that a fair comment? That sometimes your definition of ethics and ethicality may change because you are in an organization. Sorry, hold on a second. I just want to just share this. Sorry, oh gosh, sorry, this is closed in front of me. Let me say that again, or ask it as a question. Can you use the ethics that guide you in your life as the ethics to guide you in an organization? Or will there be circumstances where organizations would expect different things? Okay. Who has a code of ethics in their organization? Who has a code of ethics in their organization? Anyone have a code of ethics? I think most of you would have a code of ethics. So I think the reality is that this is about workplace. There's several things that we generally will have as part of managerial ethics. The first one is how we treat our employees. I think the reality is modern organizations have realized the value of employees, in particular in a knowledge society where your employees walk around with the factors of production in their head, where we've got to the point where we've empowered employees significantly, so much so that they've taken charge of their job and the aspect of the organization they're in. So that kind of treatment often will get paid back through positive work ethics, through elements in terms of behavior and motivation and high levels of morale. The kinds of specifics that we will see in codes of ethics is what are the guidelines in terms of hiring, and that would be everything from where do we advertise, what processes do we follow in terms of our recruitment, our selection processes, the steps in the selection process, the assessments that we'll put people through in selections as well. In terms of dismissal, again, you would have a code of conduct that would indicate this is how you behave. You would have a disciplinary code in terms of including a procedure on how to dismiss people. Also, in terms of wages, I think we realize that when it comes to wages, there are certain elements. Who remembers the three kinds of equity that we try and promote in terms of wages? Who works in wages here in reward? Remember, it's internal equity, where your job compares in terms of every other job in the organization. External equity, where we compare your job in terms of what similar jobs to yours are worth in the market, and individual equity, where we look at individual performance and trying to reward individual performance. Your work conditions, rules around privacy. Anyone want to share their rule in terms of email use in the organization? Who has an email policy, an electronics communication policy? Guys, all of you have to have these things. Who has an electronic communications policy in their organization? I used to write those as part of my consultancy a long time ago.
Luckily, we work for the same organization, so I'm sure we're following the same protocols.
We follow the same policy. I think the one thing, the organization that we work for, in particular with labor law, because I still teach labor law, is that I often am flagged by the marshal. I don't know if you've been flagged by the marshal, Nadine.
More than once.
Because in labor, in case law, there might be words that offend. So we've got this marshal guys, and I often get flagged for inappropriate language. And I'm thinking, I'm just sharing a case for labor law. So it's always interesting. The second
That,
one is, yeah, go for it, Nadine.
that's the reason I'm using Grammarly at the moment and paying for my Grammarly, so it can fix my tone as well before I send an email.
Yeah, I know. Tone. Yeah, yeah. I'm not going to carry on from there. The second one is how employees treat the organization. What kind of conflicts of interest may exist in an organization? What kind of conflicts of interest may employees encounter in an organization? I think the biggest conflict of interest is if you essentially are setting up a business to act as a supplier to your own organization, and you sit on committees that approve those tenders. We see this in government all the time, where people set up a business to provide a service back to the department that they're in. And then also conflict of interest in terms of competing against the organization, in terms of your own business. And then secrecy. Yeah, I think if I look at my oldest kid and the number of NDAs that he has signed, I mean, it's ridiculous. Every client has a set of NDAs that they have to sign. Has anyone ever been asked to sign a non-disclosure agreement in their organization? It's interesting that no one's ever been asked that. Oh, have you asked, Gav? Yeah, I've been asked if, when I worked for a client, the Sejo as well. Okay, the Sejo as well. Yeah, those are Vus when you look at them, Yonwaba as well. When you look at the content of those, it's I don't know, Gavin, when you signed it, what was your immediate impression after signing that? I might lose my job because those things are so incredibly strict, guys. And then rules around confidentiality, sharing company secrets. You signed away your life. Absolutely. Yeah, I did when I did have the consultancy. I had a couple of those that I had to. And then honesty, and honesty in dealings with the organization. And that could be anything from using equipment right through to working the hours that you get paid, right through to not stealing. Guys, and then how we treat our economic agents. What is the other term for economic agents? What is the other term that would fit to describe those economic agents? We use a different term in South Africa. Come, you know this. Come on, guys. Yes, Kansani, stakeholders. I absolutely hate that term, because if I have to hear the word stakeholder again, I would lose my mind completely. So how we treat our customers in terms of honest advertising, etc. How we treat our competitors by not doing comparative advertising in South Africa. How we treat our shareholders, our suppliers, our people who act as intermediaries, as well as how we treat our trade unions. Be careful that this is not an exam question, guys, because I have asked this previously as an exam question. To also just say, because I'm in charge of the subject from a module leader perspective, I will be putting out some kind of exam prep, pre-exam type not performer, practice exam for you guys so that we're not surprised by what the exam looks like. And I will do that closer to the time. So when we look at managerial ethics, I think there are so many things that we have to consider. But the key thing is that it is about the relationship between employees and managers and the organization and how we look after the interests of those economic agents. Right. So if we look very quickly at what all of that means. Oh, did the AI give you stakeholder today, Valencia? You better edit that out. That's so horrible, Valencia. You must report me immediately, just before I mark your assignment as well. Okay, so guys, here is what I think is one of the best codes of ethics that I have ever encountered. This is from Discovery. Do you want me to share this on the WhatsApp group? Let me put it on the WhatsApp group quickly so you can look at it as well. Oh gosh, you don't need to see what's on my WhatsApp group. Oh gosh. And no one needs to see what's on my WhatsApp group. Hold on. Second there. Okay, it's uploading. So when we look at Discovery's Code of Ethics, it's a wonderful example of what a code of ethics looks like. The first thing that it does, it shows how ethics relate to the organization's mission. It will tell you what the purpose is, and you'll see the term stakeholders there all the time. And then you'll look at who it applies to and what we expect in terms of that. So, in addition to laws and regulations, which is obvious, I think it gives you guidelines on how to deal with ethical quandaries. Wonderful example, wonderful example. So, they have ethics that will cover everything from accounting practices to conflicts of interest, to anti-corruption, and then doing business across borders. And you can see some of the stuff, what we mean by fair competition. And remember, we spoke about that a second ago. Insider trading, we know what that is, funds and fraud, human rights, etc., etc. It is a wonderful example of what a code of ethics should look like. And it's whatever it's called. It's not an exam, it's something else. I can't remember what it's called. I can't remember. So it starts with your code of ethics. And I'm very surprised. Can I just see who has signed their code of ethics? Because Nadine, I've not been asked to sign one.
I'm trying to figure out now. I don't think I've ever signed one either.
So, guys, it's okay if I, for money, share the exam paper with you. Have we, do we, because I mean, I've not signed the code of ethics. No one says I can't take a bribe. It's beers, guys. If you want the answer, it's beers. I think the reality is, I think we know how to behave ethically, though. So, I think, first of all, is to look at the concept of unethical behavior. And I think part of that is sometimes in organizations as they evolve through time, that sometimes it is appropriate for an organization to be unethical because they'll argue that in terms of our evolution, it is necessary for us to do certain things. I can't ever agree with that, but I think the reality is a lot of organizations, in terms of the initial evolution, you'll see lots of unethical behavior. And then also, we need to understand that the organization's culture has to promote ethicality. And then just the other part of it, guys, is what happens when there is pressure. And pressure is there all the time. Suppliers who offer gifts, there's so many answers that can go into that. So when we look at managing ethical behavior, I think it starts with top management. And in terms of that top management, it is the need for managers to walk the talk. I'm going to say something now, and if I'm generalizing, my apologies, and I'm quite happy to be challenged on this. I think the levels of criminality that we have in our country now essentially can come from people looking at how politicians are criminally engaged, are corrupt, steal from the poor, etc. And the attitude is almost as well, if the leaders of the country can do it, why can't I do it? Is that an unfair comment? Because we see so much criminality, we see so much fraud, we see so much corruption amongst politicians that it almost gives a window of opportunity for people to say, well, if they're doing it, why can't I do that? Or is it a simplistic interpretation? And I'm not saying it applies to everyone, but people involved in criminality can literally argue that, look at them, why can't we? Is it an unfair statement? Because when we look at our politicians, they're not the bastion of honesty and decency. I mean, there's a lack of accountability. I used to lecture um, at a master's level at UKZN, and I often dealt with government employees. And I always thought it quite strange. They always wanted consequence management, consequence management. But consequence management essentially is, you've already done the misdeed. Now I have to manage the consequences. Why not prevent the misdeed from happening? I have a real issue with that term, consequence management. I also think that once we've got managers walking the talk, you need committees that you can refer ethical issues to, and then training people in the code of ethics. The kinds of things that you have to have, which are non-negotiable. The first one, have your code of ethics. The second one is the ability to apply moral judgment, because the code of ethics cannot account for every single eventuality that you might encounter at an organization. And then it's about organizational justice. And a key thing in organizational justice is that internal equity from a salary perspective, an internal equity from how we approach people who commit offenses, and how we discipline people, etc. Anyone here want to share an ethical quandary that they've had to face in an organization? Anyone want to share some of the ethical challenges that they've encountered in their jobs? I can't be the only person talking here, guys. It's boring with me just talking. A couple of years ago, one of my students, now I've been doing this so long that I've been with Varsity College and Emirates in June for 28 years, which is not bad going for somebody who's worked on contract for 28 years. I've been with this institution a very long time ago. One of my students, who now is mid 40s, once sent me an email. So he was a finance student of mine, and he sent me a question saying, a real quandary for him, and he told me that he was asked to sign off on an accounting on an accounting statement which he knew was wrong. And he wanted to know from me, do I think you should sign it? And then he started justifying, and he said, and he realizes that in business sometimes you do things that you're uncomfortable with, that essentially you do because you want to keep your job. So he was asked to sign a financial statement that reflected incorrect information. And he was having a real ethical conundrum because he is very religious and still is very religious. And my words to him were, if it tastes like, if it feels like, if it smells like something, I'm going to use the word excrement. It is excrement. I think we all know in organizations the difference between right and wrong. And I sometimes still feel guilty because instead of signing that financial statement, he resigned from the organization because his moral judgment wouldn't allow him to misrepresent facts. And and at that point, this is 15 years ago, he was earning 70,000 Rand a month, and he walked away from that job. Who would have signed the financial statement, or who would have gone with the high road? Instead of signing the financial statement, resigned. So easy to sit here and suggest things. If you're in that situation, it's very, very tough. Anyone here have had to compromise on ethics that they're prepared to share? Okay, I won't push anymore.
It seems that it's very quiet tonight.
It's very quiet.
So I will
Yeah.
share an experience from my side. The previous
Okay.
company that I worked at, not the company that I'm currently working for, I was a sports coordinator, and I went to our executive head at that time, said to him, we need to incorporate more sports, and due to that, he said to me that he won't have any K sports at his campus, and I resigned with immediate effect.
You wouldn't have
Just
what sports?
K
Oh,
sports. Yeah.
okay.
And so I'm not going to use that word, obviously. And I resigned with immediate
Yesterday.
effect. And then about 3, 4 months later down the line, they
That is
made headlines.
disgusting.
They made international headlines, the same organization.
Yeah, I can guess who they were. I can really guess who they were. Were they the people that separated students in terms of race groups when they went?
Absolutely, same school, same campus.
I don't know if you guys ever heard of that. There was a school trip, and this Afrikaans-based school, and ek is Afrikaans, so I accept that, decided to divide the students on the buses into race groups. Yeah,
That
I'm
that
not
happened.
surprised.
That happened 3, 4 months after I left the campus.
Yeah. Ay, 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 ay. At some point, they apparently were going to put in an offer to buy the IIE, but it was literally just to determine the value of the IIE. Yeah, due to 100% due to Zule. Those people still exist. Those people still exist. Mbalenhle, do you want to share yours? You had your hand up very briefly.
It's not really mine, it's my colleague.
Okay, fine.
Yeah, so he was working in a company which had to relocate to the Eastern Cape, and he says he knew that when he gets to the Eastern Cape, he's going to resign and get another better paying job while he's there. So he felt like it would be unethical for him to do that, knowing very well that as soon as he gets to the Eastern Cape, he's going to resign and get a better job. So he then just resigned immediately.
Wow.
Yeah.
That takes a lot of adopting a high ground approach. Wow, Malentle, very impressive, actually. Anyone else want to share an ethical conundrum they've had to deal with? I mean, I can share another one. I used to, in the early days of Varsity College, they ran a business school, and this guy kept failing and failing and failing. And he then phoned me one day in my office I was still in industry at that point, phoned me in my office and offered me a bribe to pass him, because if he passed, he would get a promotion, but until he passes the course, he wouldn't get the promotion. So he offered me a bribe. Yeah, not a good idea. Not a good idea. You could imagine what I told him to do. Go for it, Jon Waber.
I don't know if this actually counts as an ethical dilemma, but this is something that happened when we were students. So one of the students in our class kind of went MIA for a couple of weeks. So the parents ended up calling the institution because nobody had heard from her, because her hometown wasn't where our university was. So another student in our class who was doing radiation therapy, she tells the lecturer that, I saw student so and so. She actually came to our department. Now, obviously, if you're going to radiation oncology, it means you have cancer. So, unfortunately, then there was this whole big dispute about whether they breached patient confidentiality, because then the school had to let
Oh,
the parents know. But then she was worried and everybody was looking for her. But then eventually the HPCSA got involved and they said, unfortunately, this is something that we don't tolerate. Like, we understand, but we don't really tolerate this. And basically, she kind of had to drop the course. And because the HPCSA also said she can't practice anything in healthcare in South Africa again. So it was
wow,
kind of that way. Her heart
wow.
was in a good place, but also ethically, they said it's not correct.
Yeah, Joe, that's a harsh decision, because I see some of the decisions that the HPCSA, whatever, I can't pronounce it now, taken. They've never that harsh ever. Well, okay, nice examples, actually, guys. Very, very nice examples. Okay, so when we look at managing ethical behavior, as I said, at the core of everything is your code of ethics. Please do yourself a favor and have a glance at that Discovery Code of Ethics. It is very, very impressive. So, in terms of initially creating the code, you have to remember this becomes a formalized policy document. If you breach the code of ethics, generally what happens is the disciplinary code is then activated. So the code of ethics is generally written as something very positive. This is what we want you to do. These are the behaviors that we want you to display. These are the standards we want to uphold. When you breach that, then obviously the disciplinary code kicks in. So when we look at the trying to apply moral judgment, generally it is about the factual information. So it's not jumping to conclusions. It is finding, discussing, investigating, holding evidence up to the light before we decide what action to take. And then decide which moral values will apply. And we'll talk about that in a second, because they're different ways to look at morality. The one could be greater good versus the other could be remedying disadvantages from the past. So all of those things become important. And then you look at the rightness and the wrongness of the decision. The problem with a gut decision, a gut feel decision, is that it's very difficult to defend a gut feel decision in court. So even though the last bit might be slightly gut feel, there has to be enough work put in initially to ensure that that gut feel is based on real evidence. So, in terms of the ethical norms that we look at, the first one, utility. So, essentially, by doing this, do we maximize what we can achieve? Rights. So, here we want to look at, are we respecting the rights of all of those individuals involved? In terms of justice, do we promote equity? Is it consistent? Is it fair? And then caring, in terms of how are we behaving in terms of our responsibilities to people. So those ethical norms essentially act as an umbrella concept in terms of every single decision that we take. Is it possible to optimize the outcome in a decision, and by doing that, not respect the rights of all involved? It's very possible, guys. It's very possible. So often you have to decide in the organization which of those ethical norms you will use to guide your decisions, because some of those contradict each other. So I quite like these flowchart things, guys. So if we look at a decision that ticks every box, you normally start with the evidence, the facts, the investigation, etc. And then you ask those questions. Does it optimize? Does it respect? Is it consistent? And are we taking care of our responsibility to take care? And then you look at the criteria that are met and not met. It's quite interesting that how by following that, you generally end up with a very, very good decision. It takes a bit of time, but that gives you a legally defensible decision. It is something that if you go to court, you can show this is what I did, these are the rights that I adhere to, this is what the code of ethics says. Those are the kinds of things that become legally defensible. And I think it's important that that term be remembered as well. So the next thing we need to look at is organizational justice. And it is about how people are treated internally in the organization. It is about fairness. Do we have equal work for equal pay? Please hold it a second. Sorry about that, guys. I had to sneeze. Right. So equal work for equal pay, etc. And there are four types of justice that we have to always take into consideration. The first one is distributive justice. Now, distributive justice specifically look at those perceptions of whether, when there is a distribution of rewards, that there is fairness linked to it. So equal work for equal pay certainly fits that. The second one is procedural justice. So procedural justice has to do with the processes that we follow to arrive at a decision. So procedural justice could apply in a promotion decision. So if there's a dispute around a promotion, you can say, here is our promotions policy, here is our affirmative action policy, and this is what we've done from a process perspective. Again, each of these might have to be legally defensible because people will take you to court. Interpersonal justice is how we treat each other and how we treated by others in terms of care and honesty and decency and respect. And informational justice, essentially, do we have enough information to take decisions? Are we provided with enough information to understand decisions? Who works in an organization where all of those are perfectly attended to? And I'd love to hear examples of how it works in your organization. Guys,
Bruce?
that is the dream. Go for it, Lisejo.
I don't think that a lot of us are quiet because we don't have anything to share with others. I think some of the questions puts us in a bit of a more uncomfortable spot
Of
to
course, of course.
not
But
know
that's
if
the
one
magic
should
of what we
be.
do here. That's the
Yeah,
magic
yeah.
of what we do here.
And not that I'm one to shy away from confrontational speaking on difficult conversations, but I'm just like, this is a recorded session. One would not know where this information may land. But my perception regarding your question on organizational justice and the four examples below, from the more than 15 years of working experience in all the different companies I've been in, I don't think there's any that actually has all four at
Wow.
once. Yeah.
How
Yeah.
often do those companies end up in court?
Well, from those that I've been in, they've been fortunate not to be put on the
Yeah.
spot as yet. Well, through the CCMA justice, yeah, they're constantly there, but
Yeah.
I mean, in the public space, not. Yeah.
Yeah. And remember, each of those apply to labor law as well. distributive justice in terms of what the penalties are, procedural fairness.
Yeah.
I would prefer that term. But you're right. And I think that's why people keep quiet, because this is a recorded session. And you'll also hear Nadine and I are very careful what we share, because it is a recorded session. Nadine, true? Because Nadine and I work for the same institution.
Very true.
Okay. Yeah. Now, newer ethical issues. I think the first one, guys, is this idea of ethical leadership. So we don't really have that. That's an American example, but we have got what replaces that in terms of uh, the specific directives given to directors. Yondela, we're going to change that. We're going to absolutely change that. We 100% will change that. Yeah, Yondela, that shouldn't be the reality for you, man. Kensani, you guys should not be unemployed. That's not right. Sorry, that is not right. So here we've got the King reports. Remember, the King reports put certain obligations on directors and CEOs, etc. And then in terms of corporate governance, there are specific guidelines from the King's reports. And then also the idea of modern online privacy, because people will say the most insane things on Facebook, on Instagram, and people don't understand. And I think sometimes it's a generational thing, but people will go onto Instagram and make the most ridiculous statements about things that they shouldn't do. We know that some employers now will run a social media check on you before they hire you, because the reality is people don't realize how dangerous social media is. And that's why you also have social media policies. Sorry, please just give me. Right. So in terms of social responsibility, thank you so much. It's, yeah, I'm a bit of a, I don't know whether it's an early cold or a little bit of hay fever, or I just want someone to feel sorry for me. Or maybe I just forgot what I was going to say and I'm checking my notes before I. Thanks for that, guys. Very clever, Valence. Okay, guys, so in terms of social responsibility, I think we know that from a quadruple bottom line, individuals expect more from organizations. If we look at the top 100 wealthiest economies in the world, so if we look at the top 100 richest entities in the world, 2/3 of those are big business. So 66% of the biggest companies, of the biggest, wealthiest institutions in the world are big business. So the reality is there are companies like Microsoft, for example, or Google that could buy themselves a country, because the wealthiest economies essentially now are in the form of multinational organizations. And because of the immense wealth they have, people expect more from these organizations. And the reality is, the reason these companies are so wealthy is because the average citizen has contributed to that wealth. And there's this expectation that they will do good, that they will give back. And I think it is about looking after communities. It's about looking after society. And that's where the triple bottom line came in. And you guys know what the triple bottom line, and now the quadruple bottom line, also part of that process. You'll do all of this in second semester when you do SUSR, guys. Sustainability, sorry, in second semester. So in terms of social responsibility, there are the areas that we concern ourselves with. The first one, our stakeholders. So generally here, we look at wealth creation, and it translates into here, people, planet, profit. People, planet, profit. You'll learn in second semester that there is a fourth P being added to that. It is purpose, people, planet, profit. And the purpose is about governance and ethics. And that's why this is in this aspect of the chapter. And so people, planet, profit. And the thinking is we want companies to give back. We want them to support social causes. We want to make sure that companies look after the natural environment, that companies initially become carbon zero and then become carbon negative, because sometimes companies cause the greatest damage to the environment. And then also look after their stakeholders. The profit specifically relates to your shareholders. So here we look at the stakeholders. Essentially, those are people who are directly impacted by the organization's operations and somehow also contribute to the organization's performance. Key in terms of that, you guys know that it's employees, shareholders, etc. This is a wheel of your stakeholders. Have a quick glance at that. But your main groups, guys, remember you have direct and indirect stakeholders, but your main group would be your shareholders, your employees, your customers. The rest would be indirect stakeholders. And then to look after the natural environment. I think ultimately it's important for companies to become carbon zero and then work towards carbon negativity. One of my favorite stories from a few years ago was when Lexus launched their new range of vehicles. They planted spec boom to counteract the carbons that those vehicles would contribute to the environment. So for every vehicle that they sold, they counted the carbons that would be created by that vehicle by planting a certain number of spec boom. Who's come across a spec boom? I've got tons in my garden. Who knows what the spec boom is?
We have tons in our smoking area.
They better be there because you guys are polluting the world, woman. They look like that. They are nature's miracle, guys. They're the most amazing plant ever. Love speckworm, guys. You get speckworm bread as well if you inclined to try that kind of thing. And if you want, guys, I've got tons of speckworm that I'll donate to you as long as you keep planting them because they are so good for the environment. And let me tell you, a lot of teachers smoke, so they better have a lot of speckworm at there because teachers are stressed. Nadine, fair comment?
Absolutely fair.
And they thrive with carbons, guys. Please plant a speckworm. And if you want, I'll send you cuttings if you would want them. The natural environment. And remember, ultimately, it's the need to become carbon negative, guys. And then, yeah, look after social welfare. Find certain philanthropic things to support. Look after the interests of communities, build schools, provide transport, create opportunities for running water, because we cannot expect government to do anything and everything. My apologies. Let me not say anything. That's a bit rude. Can't expect government to do everything. So there are two schools of thought. The one is incredibly dated in terms of, yeah, just as I was lecturing this, I've just something sprung to mind, guys. You have to try and watch this. This is brilliant. Trent Trees Apparel, Dragon's Den. Let me just open this. It won't play because it will lag. Please do me a favor and have a glance at this organization as one that does really good. The link is there. The link is there. You just find the video. I'm sure this video will play. Just find the video to play. That's not playing. Why is that? Goodness me. No, but that's the video. Do me a favor and please watch that video just to see. Oh, I love Dragons Den. Agree with you, Kensani. Watch that video in particular for a company that looks after the triple bottom line and in particular the natural environment. So for social responsibility, you make the problems, you should solve them. We want corporations to be good citizens, to be good neighbors. And then also, businesses have so much wealth that they can use some of that wealth to say thank you and look after communities, because that wealth came from communities. And then also, generally, it's good business to do social responsibility. Yeah, this is dated, guys. Sorry, this is dated. I don't like this one. The argument against is it comes from Milton Friedman. Now, Milton Friedman was a radical free market economist whose attitude was the only job of an organization is to make a profit, and that by making a profit, their focus being on the profit, they become more successful. They become more successful, they can then pay bigger taxes, and government can then look after the interests of society, etc. I don't like that. Other arguments against too much power, conflict of interest. I hate that side of the slide, to be honest. And sometimes you can't be involved in communities because you lack the expertise. I think those are just excuses for not getting involved. And yeah, you can see the arguments there. So there are different approaches to social responsibility. Come on. Okay, I'm just going to go to the next slide. It's hopeful that we won't find many companies that fit into this category. Obstructionist, where you do as little as possible. That's certainly not the institution I work for. Defensive, you do enough just to stay out of trouble with the law. Accommodative, where essentially you adhere to what the legislation says, you put smokestacks and filters on your smokestacks to reduce pollution, but you don't do much more. A proactive stance essentially sees this as part of your sustainability, as part of a way that makes sure that the organization will be around in future, where you're a citizen that you can, and you as a citizen want to contribute to society and make a difference in society. Okay, guys, I'm going to stop there because I'm going to go into a sneezing bout, and I'll